Welcome to this episode of Author Success Show. The special guest we have today is Paul Shapiro. Paul is the author of the national bestseller Clean Meat: How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner and the World. He's also the CEO of the Better Meat Co., a 4-time TEDx speaker, the host of the Business for Good podcast, and a longtime leader in food sustainability. Let us find out from Paul how he managed to convert his book into a worldwide revolution. Hi, Paul. Welcome to Author Success Show.
Jyotsna, thanks so much. Great to be talking with you.
It's my pleasure, Paul. A lot of authors write a lot of different kinds of books, but your book, Clean Meat, has kind of created a revolution around clean eating. So you first tasted clean meat in the year 2014, right? But something inspired you to go ahead and write the book. So what really compelled you to become an author in 2018?
You know, it's so funny. I never considered that I would write anything about this, like a book. I never thought I would write a book, actually. But what happened, and just to back up, so clean meat, or sometimes called cultivated meat, it's real meat. It's not an alternative to meat. It's not a substitute for meat. It's real, actual animal meat that is simply grown from animal cells rather than from animal slaughter. So you don't have to harm an animal, and you don't have to spend all the resources to raise that whole animal. So you can take little microscopic cells from an animal and put them in a cultivator where you grow them into actual animal meat. And this, for a long time, for many decades, was science fiction. Like the idea that you could produce actual meat without having to harm an animal, it was just science fiction. But it started becoming science fact. And in 2014, I had the honor of being one of the first humans ever to consume this type of meat that is oftentimes called clean meat or cultivated meat. And I was a huge advocate for this type of technology because I believed that it could solve many of humanity's problems. It could help prevent the need for animal cruelty. It could help prevent the need for the climate change emissions that come from animal agriculture. And I really thought this is a way that humanity could satiate its meat tooth, so to speak, without the need to harm animals and the planet in the process. But I didn't think that I'd be writing a book about it. I just thought this was some cool experience that I got to have. Fast forward a couple of years, and I started thinking about what I could do to support this industry, because I started thinking that this might be among the single most important technological innovations that could happen to actually sustainably feed humanity into the future and reduce our footprint on the planet. And I am not a scientist. I am not, I had no business experience. I didn't have millions of dollars to invest as a venture capitalist, but I could write. And so I pitched this book to a number of publishers. And that was toward the end of 2015, if my memory serves me correctly. And in 2016, it was sold. And I was in a very pleasant surprise that somebody wanted to hear about it. And I just got fortunate, I think.
Wow. So at that time, had you already started writing the book? Because I know you've been writing articles on food sustainability for a long time, but did you also start writing the book before pitching the idea?
No. So you're right. I had been publishing articles both in newspapers and magazines and academic journals on food sustainability for decades, but I hadn't written a book. I had a proposal of the book, like I had an outline, and I had several thousand words written, but the book ultimately ended up being about 70,000 words, I believe. And so I had only written a tiny fraction of the book by the time it was pitched. However, a little piece of history on the book, it was originally purchased by one publisher, and I was very thrilled. Then I wrote the entire manuscript with them and with their editor, who was absolutely fantastic. She did a great job helping to craft the book. And that publisher ended up falling on hard economic times. And after I had turned it in, they ended up cutting a third of all of the books that they were going to release in the following year, including my book. Oh. And so all of a sudden, like, I had a publisher, we had a contract, I had already gotten part of the advance, and the book was cut. And it wasn't relating to the book. They just cut the third of their authors that they didn't want to publish anymore. And so I had to go back out and repitch it. And I was very fortunate that Simon and Schuster ended up purchasing it. And when the book came out on its first week, it got reviews on NPR, the Wall Street Journal. It became a Washington Post bestseller. It was on the Washington Post bestseller list, admittedly only for 1 week, but still, I'll take it.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
yeah, it wasn't the New York Times bestseller, sadly, but it was a Washington Post bestseller, and I was very proud of that. And it was a great day for my mom, especially, to get to see that. And so, um, I'm proud of what the book accomplished, and it's still today. I still get messages from people who have either started their own company in this space, or invested in companies in this space, or who have joined companies as employees in this space after reading my book. So it's one of these books that, even though it came out a few years ago, it still has this impact, and it is still helping to guide a lot of people in their career decisions to help put their oar in the water and try to solve this problem, because consuming animal products is one of the driving causes of climate change and deforestation and wildlife extinction and more. And we can produce meat without animals. So let's do it.
I can absolutely see the passionate commitment that you have towards this cause. A lot of people have it for different things that they are passionate about, but through the book you were able to really amplify your message. And having a big five publisher backing your project is not easy. So what do you think really worked in your favor, Paul? After one publisher could not publish it, you could have felt dejected, and you could have tried to self-publish it, or completely stop the project, but you went ahead and tried, and Simon and Schuster signed up. So what do you think were some of the factors which made them to say a yes?
Yeah. Well, first of all, yeah, I appreciate that you said I could have felt dejected. Let me assure you just now, I did feel dejected. I definitely was not pleased by that turn of events. But I am a big believer in resilience and tenacity, and getting up after you fall. And to quote the great philosopher Rocky Balboa, when he said that in life, it is not about how hard you can hit, it is about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And that's how winning is done. And so that was my attitude. I thought, okay, they don't want this book. That's fine. Somebody else will. And went out and continued. Now, to answer your question directly, I think that what made the book special and of interest was, one, no one had ever written a book on this topic. So it's not, it's rare that you find a topic that just nobody has written about. So that had the benefit of being the first book. And since my book came out, there have been several books on the topic written. So, to the ability to publish the first book on this topic. Second, it's a really interesting look at something that is like a pop sci and pop business book, because what the book does is it chronicles the investors, the entrepreneurs, the scientists who are all racing to do something that many people think of as impossible, producing meat without animals. For thousands of years, the only way that we have had to get meat was out of animals' bodies, and that has now changed. Now we have ways to actually make meat without animals. It's kind of like, if you think about ice, for thousands of years, the only way we had to get ice was out of nature. In fact, there was a huge industry of that centered around harvesting blocks of ice from frozen lakes and frozen rivers, and putting it in insulated boats and shipping it all around the world for people's in-home ice boxes. And when refrigeration was invented in the 19th century, the ice barons, and there were barons of the ice industry, they were livid. And they railed against what they called so-called artificial ice. And they said, this is unnatural, it goes against God, it's not safe, like all the things that you would imagine somebody would do to try to protect their business. And now you fast forward today, we all have artificial ice makers in our homes. We call them freezers. We don't think there's anything unnatural about it at all. And in fact, most of us are probably glad that we don't have to get ice from nature anymore, that now we can make ice with human technology. Well, the same is so with meat. Again, for thousands of years, the only way we had to get meat was out of an animal's body. And now human technology has enabled us to make meat without animals. And I believe that in future decades, people will think, geez, I'm so glad that we no longer have to torture and slaughter animals in order to get meat, in the same way that we are glad that we don't have to go out to a frozen lake and harvest ice anymore. And it'll just seem natural. Like to us, we don't think of it as unnatural at all to have human technology producing ice. Well, I don't think it'll seem that unnatural in the future to people to have human technology producing meat either.
Fantastic. So you were not an entrepreneur when you wrote the book, Paul, but today you have a company. You're the founder of the Better Meat company. So how did this happen?
Yeah, it's just another example of how life leads you down paths that you wouldn't have expected.
Mhm.
So when I wrote the book, my goal was to try to create some publicity for this nascent industry of mimicking meat without animals. And I thought, this is my contribution. I am a writer and I can actually try to inspire people to get involved in this field. When the book was published, I had a choice. I could continue writing about the people who I thought were going to save the world, or I could just become one. And
Mm.
what I realized in writing the book was that many of the people who had started these companies did not have extensive experience. They were not former entrepreneurs. They were not people who had decades of business success. They had as much reason to start a company as I did. So I'll
Mm.
give you an example. There are these two guys, Ryan Pandya and Parimal Gandhi, and they were fresh out of college in their early 20s, back in 2014. They met in a video chat. They never even met in person, just online. They met in a video chat, and they both had this idea to create milk without cows. I don't mean like soy milk or almond milk or oat milk. I mean real cow's milk, but producing it through fermentation rather than producing it with cows. And they thought that this idea would work. And so without ever having met each other, they said, let's start a company together. Well, these are two guys in their early 20s. They had no experience in terms of being business people.
Mm.
And now, if you fast forward to today, about 7 years later, these guys have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. Their company is worth, allegedly, according to news articles, $1.5 billion.
Wow.
They have numerous products on the market today where they have real cow's milk in the product that is made without cows. And they're looking to IPO now.
Mhm.
And to me, like those are the type of stories that I tell in the book Clean Meat about people who really, we're not talking about, someone like Elon Musk, who's like a serial entrepreneur and creates one thing after the
Mhm.
next. These guys never created anything. And yet they're succeeding. And so I thought, if these guys can do it and other people in the book who I wrote about could do it, maybe I would try my hand at not just writing about these people who are saving the world, but again, just becoming one of them myself. And so I decided to co-found the Better Meat Co., which is a food technology startup in Sacramento, California. We
Mhm.
are now about 3.5 years old. And what we do is we use fermentation to create foods that really look and taste like animal meat, but they're much better for the planet and they are much better for human health as well. So it's an exciting thing to be doing. I still do write on the space, like I still
Mhm.
publish op-eds and articles and so on. But most of my time is now devoted to the other side of the table, which is actually advancing my own company here.
Wow, this is so inspiring, Paul, because I have had the same experience with a lot of my clients as well. When they wrote the book, they just wrote it because they were passionate about the topic. But later, they had a huge following. They had people writing to them about it, and that inspired them to create a product for their audience. And now many of them are entrepreneurs. So I'm really happy to see,
Wow.
this trend of authors becoming entrepreneurs because of the demand that there is there for this in the market. And your
Yeah. Wow.
wife, Toni, she's the founder of Plant Based on a Budget. So I can see a lot of things that is common between you and your wife, yet you both have your own paths, though it's kind of similar, but a little different. So how did that happen? Was it very intentional?
To some extent. So my wife is a cookbook author and her cookbooks are fantastic. Again, her name is Toni Okamoto. You can go on anywhere you get books, Amazon or anywhere else and check out her books, but she's got great books on plant-based eating. And so she became an author before I did. And her
Mhm.
books have been phenomenally successful. They all sell a minimum of at least multiple tens of thousands of copies. And she's done this well, primarily through building a social media following first. So it's quite an inspirational story. So she created this blog called Plant Based on a Budget that really was just a side project. It was like a volunteer hobby for her, where she wanted to teach people that you can eat healthy for very little money. Because as you know, people have these misconceptions about eating healthy or about eating plant-based. And she wanted to show, look, you can actually do this for very little money. And so the whole blog was intended mainly for her friends and family to share recipes. But it started gaining some attention, and it started gaining a following. And it got to the point where she started gaining hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram and Facebook and so on. And that led her to quit her job and focus full time on this blog, where now Plant Based on a Budget, with no outside investors, just through revenue generation alone, through selling ads and sponsored content and so on, creates enough revenue that she now has 6 employees.
Wow.
So, she's gone from, having this as a hobby and her side time to being a full-time business with 6 employees just through revenue generation. And that has helped her to really launch her successful career as an author, where she can sell huge numbers of books because she has a huge following on social media of people who are really interested in her work. And rightfully so, because she's putting out great content. She's putting out things that people really value, a way that you can both save money and save your life with good, healthy food. It's really great. So I'm very proud of her. And I tout her all the time. In fact, I like to joke that I am the husband who, when we're at a restaurant and somebody recognizes her, I'm the guy they ask to take a photo of them with her.
That's amazing. And I'm sure she must have inspired you also to write your book.
She was a big inspiration for me in a lot of ways. So her first book came out, I believe, in 2017, and mine came out in 2018. And they're very different. Writing cookbooks is just really different from writing a book like Clean Meat. Clean Meat is an investigative look at an industry. So I went around and talked to a lot of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs and scientists and academics. It's just a very different type of thing. And less tasty too, because the amount of clean meat that I got to eat in the researching of the book was quite small, whereas she gets to eat everything that she makes. But yeah, she's been an inspiration to me in a number of ways, and I am eternally grateful that our paths crossed.
That's awesome. So, Paul, the other thing that I noticed about you, which is again very different from typical authors, is that most authors are really excited during their book launch. They go on a book tour, they go on radio, TV, everywhere, and then they move on to their next project. But you published this book in 2018, and 4 years later, you're still talking about it on podcasts. So what are some of the things that you have been doing on your own? Because your publisher is not asking you to do this. You're doing this on your own. So what are some of the marketing strategies that you would like to share with first-time authors, which have really helped you?
Yeah. So first, let me just be clear. This is my life's passion. It's not just a book. I really am horrified by how we treat animals, especially the animals who we raise for food. And most importantly, I believe that if we are going to have a sustainable future as a species on this planet, we need to free ourselves from raising and slaughtering animals. It has to be left in the past. So I am very passionate about this. The book was one contribution of mine toward that movement, but it's not the only one. And so I continue to write, to give speeches, to do interviews, whatever I can to help spread this message that we can have a less violent and more peaceful relationship with our fellow creatures on this planet. So in order for me to continue promoting that, the book is a very good tool. So as an example, if I publish a letter to the editor in the New York Times and it says underneath my name, Paul Shapiro is the author of Clean Meat, How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner in the World, it's good because it's not only having a letter on an important topic in a big newspaper, but it helps to promote the book. And so that was, just a week ago. I'm referencing that just because a week ago that happened. Or if I publish an opinion editorial, or sometimes called an op-ed in a newspaper like the Washington Post, and it says in my bio on there, Paul Shapiro is the author of Clean Meat. It does help to get attention for the book also. My real primary goal is not so much to sell copies of the book, although I would love to do that. That's fantastic. I hope that people here who are listening will go out and buy it. But the goal is to help inspire a movement to create a world in which we no longer view the animals of this planet as existing merely for us. The animals of this world don't exist for us. They exist with us. and we should treat them in ways that are far better than we do. Right now, we treat animals who we raise for food worse than the most violent criminals. We don't take murderers and rapists and put them in prison cells where they can't move their whole lives, where they can't even lift their arms, they can't turn around. Yet that's what we do to chickens and pigs, and it's terrible, and it's something that I think future generations will be shocked by. So for me, this is a lifelong cause. It's not just one book. It's not just a topic that I was interested in at one point in my life. From my childhood to the present, I have felt like my goal, for my reason for existing, is to try to end the war that humanity is waging on the rest of the planet. And this is my contribution to doing that.
Wow, very well said, Paul. I think because you're able to think beyond you and you're able to connect with the bigger purpose, you're able to do this for the rest of your life. And that is so inspiring for all of us. And I've been a vegetarian all my life. But today in
Good
this,
for you.
yeah, but now today I learned so much more about how we can make this world a better place through your research, Paul. And I just wish that all the people who are watching, listening to this episode, go check out more about your work and Clean Meat. So where can people find out more about you?
Oh, well, that's so nice of you, Josina. Thank you very much. So if you're interested in the book, you can buy Clean Meat anywhere books are sold, on Amazon or anywhere else, but the official website for the book is just cleanmeat.com. Again, that's cleanmeat.com. And if you're interested in my company, The Better Meat Co., we are online at bettermeat.co. Again, that's bettermeat.co. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have thoughts, send me a message via one of those websites. I'd love to hear from you and see if we might be able to do some good in the world together.
Thank you so much, Paul. We'll have all the links right below in the show notes. And it's been such an honor to have this conversation with you.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Josina. Thank you so much. And thanks for all that you're doing to help aspiring authors to realize their dreams.
Thanks.